Today on Let's Build This, we're going to talk about mental wellness and the supposed things that cause us to make poor mental health choices. All right. For those of you who don't follow astrology, all that other stuff, this last week, supposedly, and I cannot confirm this, but evidently Mercury was in retrograde. Now, if you haven't heard that term before, um, here's what it is evidently, so, and this is based on my understanding. So if anybody out there is like, no, Brad, you're wrong, that's not what it means, please let me know and I'll correct it, or I'll take this down, because today I'm speaking literally from a place of extreme partial understanding. But this came up in a conversation. All right. I was hanging, I have friends, even though I work a ton. And I was spending some time with them actually last night. And this discussion came up, which is why I want to put it out there. Because it's entertaining on one end of the spectrum, and it could be extremely impactful if it is found and like there's scientific proof behind it, right? All right. So the point is evidently, like Mercury and Earth, I don't think they go in the same direction in terms of their orbit, or something along the lines of like they cross orbits, or anyway, long story short, the whole premise is this: that when quote unquote Mercury is in retrograde, everybody has a bad week or a bad time period, right? Technology doesn't work the right way. People are typically like off feeling. They people have things that don't go well. Just a whole bunch of like stuff, and nothing goes as it's supposed to go. Okay. Now, I have my friends last night. Like, some people knew what this meant, some people didn't know what it meant, and I'll. It started like this. All right, so we were just discussing how the week had gone. Everybody does different things. I've got a friend who's in financial planning. I've got some friends who are like in social work and clinical therapy. I've got friends who are in healthcare. I've got friends. This last night, this was a group of friends who. A couple of them are one is in retail management, the other is in financial services. We've got a nurse, and we've got another healthcare social worker. Okay, and the resounding outside of one, um, the resounding rationale that Mercury being in retrograde was the cause for everybody having a really bad week. and then my friend, who's the nurse, starts going, wait, you don't actually believe that, bull. and he's like, you understand there's this other part of the brain, and like in science there's statistics, and all Mercury in retrograde is doing is this confirmation bias. Okay, and I can see both, right? I do believe that there's some form of interconnectedness across humanity and across beings, animals, all that stuff, right? I do believe we are all connected in one way, shape, or form. On the other hand, the reason I bring this up is because I often feel that if people can find a reason to rationalize why they should not be held accountable, they do it. Because guess what? That's way easier to blame something for the cause of something not going well, rather than owning it and reflecting on the fact that, hey, maybe I just did not execute at the rate that I needed to, or guess what? Maybe this time I just didn't perform well, or guess what? I didn't know all the details I needed to know in order to do well at this, right? Rather than taking it and internalizing it and looking in the mirror, often people make excuses, right? Or quote unquote rationalizations or rationalize, which cool thing, right? Rational lies, right? So people and human nature and everything, they do this. And I guess the reason I wanted to go through this with everybody is that in the last episode, we talked a lot about motivation or how to keep people motivated and trying new things. And one thing I see often in the entrepreneurs that I work with and coach and the CEOs I work with and the like managers and all these people that I work with, both as clients and internally and with friends, they all do the same thing. They're cats. They don't want to be wrangled, and they consistently create reasons or find reasons, identify reasons why they're failing. And realistically, they spend a lot of energy doing this. There's a ton of energy put into identifying crazy ass reasons where people are just they go, well, it's not my fault. It's this reason's fault, or it's this reason's fault, or Mercury's in retrograde, or my astrological sign didn't line up. And I believe that there is proof of work as to when to believe in that stuff, but I'm also a firm believer that what we are doing when we give every ounce of power or control to those reasons or excuses is we are diminishing the power of being a human being. I mean, human beings and we as people have been we are some of the most powerful organisms in terms of intelligence, in terms of creativity, in terms of putting together, creating things, finding solutions, problem solving, everything. There's 7.2 billion people in the world. We've discovered. And now a word from our sponsor, Anchor.fm. Here's the deal. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's one of the easiest ways to create a podcast. Let me start. In my first episode ever, I talked about fear. And fear comes from a lot of places, one of them being able to access technology. But Anchor FM is free. It's a creation tool that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. They'll even distribute it for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and a bunch more. And guess what? The coolest thing is they even connect you with sponsors if you want at no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So here's the deal. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Again, go to anchor.fm to get started or search in your app library for anchor.fm. All right. So for those of you who don't know, I'm doing this podcast through my phone right now, just because the only time I have during the day is when I'm driving in between offices or other areas like the B yard or the podcast studio, which we coordinate, and typically it's filled, so I don't really get a chance, and I try not to step on people's toes up there, all that stuff. So I'm saying about rationalizing all of this stuff in people's brains, like that is normal human behavior. It's normal human behavior. And it makes sense why. If you think about the psychology behind doing that, the premise is your brain at its core is trying to protect you, not only physically, but emotionally. Because if the emotional part of it alleviates stress, and stress as we know, based on physiology and biology, stress creates a unhealthy environment for your body most of the time. There's good stress, bad stress. Discussion for another day. But here's why I want you all to think about this. Typically, when people start throwing these excuses or these rationalizations out there, it's not wrong, but our job and my job as a leader and as a manager is to help them understand and listen to themselves, right? And often, one of the biggest things that we as a leader or a manager can do is help somebody challenge their own thought process through questioning. I am considering putting together a course on this, on how to do that. And if you are a trained, if you're trained in some of these questioning techniques, or if you are a coach, a life coach, a business coach, or if you're a therapist, or if you're a doctor, not everybody gets this training, right? And I use it often when working with clients to help empower them, right? Because often fear comes in, and we've talked about fear. And so some of the techniques using this are based around the fact of, hey, one, when a thought enters your brain, ask yourself, is this thought true? And more often than not, your brain is going to say yes. And then the next thought process is, great, is it completely true? And the answer your brain will probably say is, no, it is not completely true. Then the third question you need to ask yourself is, okay, if it's not completely true, would the opposite be more true? Right? So then your brain probably goes, yeah, it's probably more true. And then the follow-up question is, so if that is more true, if you spun the thought on its head, now we've just flipped it to a half glass full approach, right? Like, there's a lot of times where, in our belief systems, personally, we have a lot of internal mental constraints. And knowing that the human brain and the human being and the human body has potential to do things that are amazingly creative, amazingly possible, things that shouldn't be possible, right? Like designing an airplane so human beings can fly, right? That stuff came out of the human brain and science, and we created the science to allow that to happen, and we tested it, and we're willing to take the risks, and plenty of people crashed their planes and did all this stuff. But at the end of the day, now we can fly. So my point is this, all right? One, when those rational lies come up, those excuses, like when Mercury is in retrograde, that's the reason things are happening. It is a confirmation bias. One. Two, yeah, is there potential for it to not be a confirmation bias and be real? Of course. But the bigger thing is that we as human beings can overcome that individually if we understand the potential of the human brain and the human body and everything that we are capable of, right? So irregardless of the reasons why something happens, we have the power to overcome it. You just have to believe that you can, and you have to keep working at it. Not everything is always going to go right the first time. In fact, most of the time that you do something, whether you're trying to teach something, or you're trying to build something, or you're trying to help somebody, or you're trying to work out and you're trying to lift weights, or you're going to screw it up. And so just keep in mind that yes, the rationalizations, it's okay to have empathy and understand that they are real for your team and the people you work with. But it is your job, and it is my job, to make sure that people look at that stuff and go, wait a tick. Like, okay, yes, it might be true, but I don't have to give up all my power to that reason. I can take back control and I can look at the situation or I can look at what's happening, and I have more control than I think I do in this moment in time if I challenge that thought process. And so I'm going to put together something. So one of the courses will be in like questioning techniques and coaching techniques, um, and I think it'll help all of you because this stuff isn't that complicated. You just have to help somebody lead. You have to be good at leading somebody through their own thought process, which means that if you're a high level thinker, sometimes it's really hard to do because you struggle. I know I struggle often when I'm thinking at that 50,000, 100,000 foot view to like go through every detail because I'm worried about the big rocks in the jar rather than tying all the details together, which is like the water in the jar. So, um, but yeah. So anyway, I hope you're having a good Saturday or a good day, good Saturday morning. It's Saturday morning, um, and you're getting outside because it's. I know the weather, at least where I'm at, is nice out. But even if it's not, get outside. Fresh air is good for you. And we will talk to you again later. Take care.